They buried the footage, but I saw it. The footage they didn't want anyone to see. Beyoncé's Super Bowl ritual, the one that was never meant to be revealed. What happened behind closed doors that night wasn't just a performance. It was something darker, something that should have stayed hidden forever. I was there, and what I saw, it's something I'm still trying to forget. But I can't. I have to tell you now. The NFL covered it up for a reason. And once you hear the truth, you'll never look at the Super Bowl the same way again. Let me take you back. I've been keeping this inside for too long, but it's time I finally tell you what I saw. The thing they'll never admit. The truth they'll do anything to keep hidden. I can't stand the weight of it anymore, and I need you to hear it. I was there, behind the scenes, during Beyoncé's Super Bowl performance, not a part of her team, just someone who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. A nobody, really, just trying to do my job. But what I saw, what I stumbled onto, that's something I can never forget. It wasn't just a show, a number. That night, they weren't just rehearsing for the performance. They were preparing for something much darker. Something you won't find in any mainstream headline. Something they made sure stayed buried. It was a few weeks ago, during rehearsals. Everything seemed normal at first. The usual chaos, people rushing around, the music blaring from speakers. But there was an undercurrent of tension, a quiet that you couldn't ignore, even as the crew worked tirelessly to pull it all together. I remember walking past the stage, glancing at Beyoncé as she stood there, flawless as always. She was focused, but her eyes, they were distant, like she wasn't even there. I didn't think much of it at the time. After all, it's Beyoncé, right? You don't question perfection, but there was something in the air, something that didn't feel right. Like there was an energy surrounding her, an energy that no one else seemed to acknowledge. It was unsettling. I brushed it off as nerves, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. The oddest part, though, came when I walked past one of the private rooms backstage. The door was cracked open, and I saw them, her team, gathered around in a circle, their heads bowed, hands clasped together. It wasn't like a regular rehearsal. The way they moved, the way they whispered, I couldn't understand it. It wasn't rehearsing choreography or discussing the set. It felt like they were preparing for something ceremonial. And that's when I felt it. The temperature dropped. A chill ran down my spine. I shouldn't have stayed. I should have kept walking. But curiosity, that damn curiosity, it got the best of me. I stepped closer, just enough to catch a glimpse through the crack in the door. What I saw, I'll never be able to forget. They weren't just praying or meditating. They were chanting, low, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. And Beyoncé, she wasn't standing there like the superstar we all know. No, she was kneeling. Her eyes were closed and her hands were raised, almost as if she was receiving something. The air felt thick, heavy, like the room itself was alive. I couldn't explain it, but I swear something in that room shifted as they chanted. I remember hearing one word over and over again, a word I couldn't understand, but it had power. The kind of power that makes your heart race and your body freeze at the same time. I knew I was intruding, that I should have turned away, but I couldn't. I couldn't tear my eyes away from it. There was something magnetic about the scene, something that kept me rooted to the spot. I didn't even hear the footsteps approaching. "Get out!" The voice came from behind me, low and sharp. I spun around to see a man standing there dressed in black, his face partially hidden by a hood. He wasn't part of the crew I'd seen earlier. His eyes, though, they were cold, calculating. He didn't need to say more. I didn't question him. I just left. But as I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had seen something I wasn't supposed to see. And in that moment, I knew. I knew I wasn't just a witness. I was now part of it. I couldn't go to anyone. No one would believe me. Who would? This was Beyoncé we were talking about. The NFL, the biggest event in the world. No one would risk their careers to expose the truth. But I couldn't forget what I saw. I couldn't ignore the feeling of something dark lingering in that room, in the air, and even inside me now. But I didn't say anything. I couldn't. For weeks, I kept my mouth shut, pretended nothing had happened. But then, a few days later, I found out that something had gone wrong. The footage. I was part of the crew that filmed behind-the-scenes footage. Just snippets, nothing too revealing. Beyoncé warming up, the crew prepping the set. But when I went to check the files, something was wrong. The footage, all of it, was gone. Not just deleted, wiped clean. No trace. It didn't make sense. How could it all vanish? I tried to access it again, but the files were corrupted. It was like it had never existed. I should have walked away then, but I didn't. I started asking around, and that's when I learned the truth. The NFL had made sure the footage was destroyed. They didn't want anyone to know what happened. They didn't want anyone to see what I saw in that room, because if the world knew, it would ruin everything. I can't keep this to myself anymore. I have to tell someone. I can't carry this knowledge, this weight anymore. But the question is, why? Why did they do it? Why was the ritual so important? And why did the NFL go so far to hide it? What happened that night, it's not just something they wanted to keep from the fans. It's something they're scared of. Something that could tear apart everything we think we know about that performance. But the worst part, the part that haunts me every single day, I don't think this is over. I think whatever they were summoning in that room, it's still out there. And now, I can't shake the feeling that they're still watching. But you have to understand, I wasn't supposed to see this. I wasn't supposed to be a part of it. But now, it's too late. This is just the beginning. And I haven't even told you everything yet. Wait until you hear what happened next. The door clicked shut behind me with an almost imperceptible sound, and for a moment, I thought I'd walked into a completely different world. The room wasn't what I expected, not cold or sterile, like the backstage chaos I had imagined. No, this was calm, too calm. The walls were a soft beige, the kind of neutral shade that's supposed to make you feel at ease. The lighting was warm, but not too harsh, casting a soft glow over everything. It looked like someone had spent a lot of time making this space feel welcoming, but at the same time, it had that untouched, perfectly polished feel. The kind of space no one really lives in. A faint scent of lavender lingered in the air, an odd choice for a backstage area. It should have smelled like paint, sweat, and the tension of rehearsals, but it didn't. Instead, the scent was subtle, almost comforting. A forced comfort, if anything. I took a few steps forward, glancing around. The floor was immaculate, no dust, no scuffs. It looked like someone had gone over it with a fine-toothed comb. The furniture, too, looked too perfect. Modern but minimalist. Clean lines. No clutter. A sleek leather couch sat against one wall, and a glass coffee table reflected the dim light. It should have been an inviting space, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't meant for people. It was meant to look like it belonged to people, but it didn't feel real. It felt staged. I hesitated for a moment, lingering by the door, unsure of whether I should step further in. There was something off. I couldn't quite place it. The silence in the room was almost too thick. The hum of the stadium outside the door, people, chatter, distant sounds, felt muffled, as though the walls were holding it all in, like the room was its own world, isolated from everything else. I moved farther in, a slight unease crawling up my spine. The air felt too still, but the room, the space itself, was so perfectly arranged that I thought it might have just been me overthinking. But then, I noticed the chairs. They weren't lined up casually like you'd expect in a green room or even placed with a touch of carelessness. Number. The chairs were positioned in a circle, perfectly aligned, just a few feet apart, as if someone had planned where every person would sit before they arrived. It was too deliberate, too intentional. The smallest details, the kind of things you wouldn't normally notice, started gnawing at me. The low hum of the lights above, the faint sound of a fan, the way the shadows seemed to linger just a little too long. I told myself it was nothing, that I was just being paranoid. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. I moved to sit down, a hand resting on the back of one of the chairs. As my fingers brushed against the cool surface, I realized it wasn't the worn texture I've expected. It was too smooth, too new. Something about it didn't sit right. The quality of the materials, everything was just a little too polished, a little too pristine. I could hear my own breathing now, the faint echo of it bouncing off the walls. The room was pressing in on me, its emptiness becoming a weight. The silence seemed thicker now, almost suffocating. Then there was a sound. A door creaked open behind me, just out of sight. I stiffened, my body locking into place as I turned my head toward it. But nothing. No one. The door stood wide, but there was no movement. Nothing changed. The faint smell of lavender still lingered, still so strangely calming in this quiet, immaculate space. I turned back to the chairs, trying to brush off the moment of tension. It was just a creaky door. It happened in old buildings all the time, right? But then I saw the room in its entirety, as though for the first time. The way the space felt too perfect, too serene, too empty. No personal touches. No signs that anyone had been here for more than a few minutes. No signs of living. I hadn't been here long, but I could already feel it. The wrongness. It wasn't supposed to feel this empty, this artificial, this still. My hand moved away from the chair, a chill crawling across my skin. I stood there, the silence pressing in harder now, feeling heavier with each passing second. And that was when I noticed the mirrors. Not just one, but several large mirrors along the walls, each reflecting the space back at me. They seemed too clean, almost unnervingly so. Each reflection distorted the light slightly, making the room look a little off, like everything was wrong in a way I couldn't fully grasp. I took a step toward one of the mirrors, drawn in by the strange way it seemed to distort everything. As I stood in front of it, I felt my heartbeat quicken, the reflection of myself staring back at me. Too still. The air, once filled with the smell of lavender, now felt almost too thick to breathe. The room felt smaller, more closed in. It was like the space was closing in on me. Why did I feel so trapped? I turned quickly, scanning the rest of the room. The door I had entered through was still open, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that I wasn't alone here. My hand reached for my phone in my pocket. I needed to get out of here. I needed to leave. But the moment I grabbed the phone, I heard it again. A faint sound. Whispers. Low. Barely audible at first, but unmistakable. I froze. The whispers came from the corner of the room, just out of sight. My heart raced as I took an instinctual step back, but my feet were already moving forward, drawn toward the sound, even as my brain screamed at me to leave. But before I could react, before I could even turn around, another door opened. And this time, I saw them. Figures. Standing still in the corner of the room, hidden in the shadows. They didn't move. Didn't speak, but their presence felt like a weight I couldn't escape. I didn't know what to do, and for a moment, the whispers grew louder. The silence, now shattered, was filled with words I couldn't understand. And the room felt like it was alive, like it was waiting for something, waiting for me. The last thing I remember before I turned to leave was the door closing softly behind me. But even as I walked away, I felt it. The pull. The sense that I was no longer the one in control. And I wasn't sure if I would ever be able to escape the feeling of being watched. The stillness of the room was suffocating. But I had to keep moving. I had to get away from the weirdness that had started to settle like a heavy fog over everything. But the thing about unease is that it doesn't announce itself. It creeps in, slowly, insidiously, until you're standing in the middle of it and wondering how you even got there. The moment I stepped back into the hall, I felt it again. The low hum of discomfort, that strange energy that followed me, like a shadow I couldn't outrun. But this time, it was different. It wasn't just the space anymore. It was the people, their eyes, the way they moved. I hadn't noticed him at first, but as I walked down the corridor, I caught a glimpse of someone standing by the far end, leaning against the wall. He wasn't anyone I recognized. He wasn't wearing any official uniform, nothing that identified him as part of the crew. His clothes were simple, but the way he stood, arms crossed, head tilted slightly, made me pause for a moment. It wasn't the look itself that made me uncomfortable. It was the feeling behind it. His eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my skin prickle. He didn't smile, didn't nod, just watched. And that was it. There was something in that look, something almost too knowing. As if he'd seen me before. As if he knew exactly who I was and maybe even why I was there. It wasn't the kind of look you get from a stranger. It was the look you get when someone sees right through you. I tried to shake it off, just keep walking, but his gaze didn't leave me. Not once. I felt a sudden urge to turn and walk faster, but I forced myself to continue at a normal pace. His stare followed me down the hall, the tension thickening with every step. But then something stopped me. The door at the end of the hallway was shut tight, but not in the way you'd expect. It was locked. The door itself didn't look special, just a simple wooden door with a brass handle. Nothing about it stood out, except for the fact that it was locked and that there was no sign on it. Not a single label. No reason for it to be hidden away. I stood there for a moment, my fingers hovering over the cold metal of the doorknob, feeling an odd compulsion to open it, to see what was behind it. But the more I stared at it, the more I realized that I wasn't supposed to be curious. I didn't belong in there. I shook my head, but the feeling lingered. Something about that locked door made me feel trapped, like the space around it was closing in on me. I walked past it quickly, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up, and the sense of being watched didn't leave. It was as if the door itself was waiting, patient, knowing that someday someone would come along and open it. I wasn't that person. Not yet. As I moved further down the hallway, I noticed something even stranger. A group of staff members. 4 or 5 of them were gathered in the corner, but there was something about the way they were standing that didn't sit right. Their posture was rigid, too perfect, too practiced. And their conversations? They were too rehearsed. Their words didn't flow the way normal conversations did. They were stilted, almost like they were saying things they were told to say. I couldn't hear everything, but I could make out snippets, things that didn't make sense. "Make sure the ritual is perfect," one of them said. "It has to be precise. No room for mistakes." They were so focused on whatever they were discussing. They didn't even acknowledge me as I passed by. But the way they avoided eye contact, the way their voices dropped lower as if they were trying to make sure no one overheard, it made my heart race. I tried to keep my face neutral, to not show that something was starting to feel wrong, but it was getting harder to ignore the growing sense of unease creeping in. It wasn't the performance or the rehearsals anymore. This was something else, something no one was telling me. I continued down the hall, trying to shake the feeling, but as I approached the main area, I saw Beyoncé standing at the center of the room. She was talking to a few of her staff, but she wasn't quite herself. She wasn't the charismatic, confident celebrity I was used to seeing on screen. She was distant, disconnected. Her movements were slow, almost deliberate, like she wasn't fully there. I stopped, watching from a distance. She glanced up, her eyes locking onto mine for a split second, and then quickly looking away. But that brief glance, there was something about it. Something I couldn't put my finger on. She looked blank, like she wasn't aware of her surroundings. I almost didn't believe it, but the more I stared, the more I realized it wasn't just a tired gaze. It was something else. Something too controlled. Too cold. I felt my heart rate increase again, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. It was like she was trapped. Her face held a strained calmness, but there was an emptiness in her eyes, like she was looking through me, not at me. Her smile was stiff, forced. But what struck me most was the way she spoke. It was almost too perfect, like her words were pre-unscripted. She didn't even sound like herself anymore. It was robotic, rehearsed. The staff around her didn't seem to notice. Or maybe they were just too used to it. They continued to nod along, smiling too wide, speaking in their rehearsed tones, like everything was perfectly normal. Like nothing at all felt out of place. but I could feel it. The weight in the air, the heaviness in the room, the coldness that surrounded Beyoncé. It was all too much to ignore. It was as if everything was running on autopilot. The staff, the celebrity, the space itself, all of it felt wrong. And that's when I realized something I couldn't ignore anymore. I wasn't just witnessing a performance. This wasn't just about rehearsals or preparation. There was something deeper happening, something hidden. But what? And why was I, of all people, allowed to see it? I wasn't sure I wanted to find out, but the feeling in the pit of my stomach told me I wasn't walking away from this anytime soon. What was really going on behind those closed doors, and who was in control of it all? I had been walking in circles, trying to ignore the growing sense of wrongness that clung to the air like smoke. But with every step, the feeling intensified. Something was happening, something I couldn't explain, and every instinct in my body screamed that I was already too deep into something I couldn't escape. I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me. The unease from earlier, the strange looks, the locked door. It had to be paranoia. But as I wandered further down the hall, something shifted. It was subtle, like a change in the atmosphere. Something that didn't belong. I paused in front of a hallway mirror, glancing at my reflection. For a brief moment, I saw something strange. A flicker, just out of the corner of my eye. I turned to look, but the hallway was empty. Just the cold, polished wall stretching out in front of me, echoing the silence. It was quiet now, too quiet. I tried to brush it off, but my fingers clenched around my phone. I checked the time, almost an hour since I'd last glanced at it. It wasn't the clock that bothered me, though. It was the fact that everything seemed still. Like time was moving differently here. Like the space itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I stepped into the next room, trying to shake off the tension, hoping to find something, anything, that would make sense of all this. But the moment I crossed the threshold, I knew something was off. There was a sound, a low hum that didn't belong. It was coming from one of the corners of the room. At first I thought it was just the air conditioning or a piece of equipment malfunctioning. But as I moved closer, it was too steady. I turned around, scanning the room, looking for any rational explanation. The walls were adorned with abstract art, cheap, impersonal decorations, the kind of stuff you expect in a hotel lobby, sterile and clean. But there was nothing here that made sense anymore. Nothing that felt real. And then I saw it. The door at the far end, partially ajar. I hadn't noticed it before. It was the same kind of door I had passed earlier, the one that had been locked. But this one wasn't closed completely. And through the small gap, I could see a dim light flickering inside. It was strange. It wasn't the kind of light you'd expect in a room that had been left unattended. It was flickering, unstable, like something was malfunctioning. But I knew something else, something that made my blood run cold. The light had a reddish hue. It wasn't just an ordinary bulb. I stepped closer, my heart pounding in my chest. My legs felt heavy, like I was dragging them through sand. The air around me was thick with something I couldn't name. Fear, maybe, anxiety, or something worse. As I stood there, just inches away from the door, I heard it again. The faint hum, now louder, more insistent. It was like it was calling me. The sensation of being drawn towards something I shouldn't be near. A magnetic pull that I couldn't resist, even if I wanted to. I reached for the handle, but the door swung open before I could touch it, as if something was waiting on the other side. And when it opened, the sudden rush of cold air hit me, like I'd just walked into a freezer. The temperature dropped so quickly I gasped for breath. And that's when I saw it. The room was dark, barely lit by that flickering light. But that wasn't what made my stomach lurch. It was the figure standing in the center. I froze, unsure if I was seeing things. A silhouette, standing still as if it had been waiting there for me. I could make out the outline of a person, but no details. Just a shape, standing unmoving in the dark. The hum was deafening now, vibrating through the floor, the walls, my body. It was everywhere, crawling under my skin. My hands trembled, and for a moment, I almost stepped back. But something in me, some desperate need to understand, pulled me forward. I blinked, and the figure was gone. Vanished. I didn't hear any footsteps. There were no sounds, nothing but the hum still pressing against my eardrums. I stood there, paralyzed, as the coldness around me seemed to seep deeper into my bones. I wanted to leave. I had to leave, but I couldn't. My legs wouldn't move. And then, just as I started to back away, I heard something else. A voice. It was faint at first, like a whisper, but it grew louder with every breath I took. It wasn't a single voice. It was multiple voices, all speaking in unison, all saying the same thing. "Don't go!" My chest tightened, the air thickening as if the walls were closing in. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, my ears ringing. I wanted to scream, to run, but my feet wouldn't obey. I just stood there, frozen, staring into the dark room where the figure had been. Now empty again, silent. I finally took a step back, my breath shallow, panic rising in my throat. But as I turned to leave, something shifted behind me, a shadow slipping across the wall. No one was there, but I could feel it, like a presence moving just out of sight. I turned around again, desperate to find something, some clue, some explanation for what was happening. But there was nothing. The room was empty, silent, as though nothing had happened at all. Except I knew it had. I knew it. Something had changed. I couldn't explain it. I couldn't understand it, but everything that had felt off before, the weird looks, the locked door, the strange hum, wasn't just coincidence. It wasn't in my head. This place was alive with something I wasn't meant to see. And the deeper I got into this, the more I realized I couldn't get out. I wasn't going to be allowed to leave without uncovering the truth. But at what cost? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was already too deep. The more I tried to ignore it, the more I understood. It wasn't over yet. It was only just beginning. The room had become unbearable. The air was thick, suffocating, as if the walls were closing in on me, pushing me further into a place I couldn't escape. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think clearly, couldn't move. My legs were frozen, my feet stuck to the floor, and all I could do was stare at the walls that seemed to grow taller, more menacing with each passing second. I wanted to scream, to run, but it was as if my mind and body had betrayed me. I had to get out. I had to get out. But there was something more pressing. Something I couldn't deny. Something in the room that had been there all along. It was watching me, waiting. I felt it before I heard it. It started as a faint whisper, a murmur that felt distant, like it was coming from deep inside my skull. It was too soft to be real, too far away to make sense. But then it grew louder and louder until it became an undeniable voice, a chorus of whispers, all speaking at once in different tones, in different languages. They spoke to me, around me, through me, their words mixing into a maddening cacophony. "Don't look," one voice said, its tone cold and sharp. "Turn away," another whispered, soft and pleading. I was paralyzed, unable to shut out the noise, unable to escape the tightness building in my chest. Each whisper sounded familiar, like voices I knew but couldn't place. They pulled me apart, fraying the edges of my sanity piece by piece. I tried to move, tried to shake my head to clear the voices, but they wouldn't stop. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding in my ears, and yet the words kept coming. They were inside me now, inside my mind, pushing me to listen, to understand. "Look at her," one voice said. But it wasn't just the voice that sent chills through me, it was the feeling that came with it. The weight of it. Like I was being forced to see something I couldn't unsee. The room felt smaller now, every inch of it closing in on me. I tried to step forward, to get away from the whispers, but my feet wouldn't move. It was as if I was stuck in place, frozen in a nightmare I couldn't wake from. The whispers became louder, more frantic. "Look at her," they urged again. "She's waiting for you." A sudden, sharp breath caught in my throat as the temperature in the room dropped, a cold that cut through me like ice. I shivered uncontrollably, but it wasn't just the cold. It was the presence, the sensation that something or someone was standing behind me, breathing down my neck, waiting for me to turn around. But I couldn't. I couldn't turn. I couldn't face whatever it was that had entered the room with me. The whispers grew more insistent, angrier. "Look at her. She's waiting for you." I spun around, heart racing, but when I looked, there was nothing. Just the same empty room, the same sterile walls, the same flickering light. I could hear my pulse in my ears, my breath ragged as I tried to steady myself. But the whispers didn't stop. They were in my head, louder now, echoing through the room. Then I saw it. It wasn't a person. It wasn't even a shape. It was a feeling, a sensation that I knew, deep down, was far worse than anything I had seen before. It was as if the room itself had become something else, alive, aware, watching me. I felt its eyes on me, through me. I closed my eyes, squeezing them shut as hard as I could, trying to block out the suffocating feeling. But even with my eyes closed, I felt it. I felt the weight of it bearing down on me. I was no longer just hearing the whispers. I was becoming them. The voices had merged into one collective thought. A thought that wasn't my own, but was forcing its way into my mind. And then, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, the room shifted. The air snapped. I opened my eyes. She was standing there. The figure that had been hidden in the corner. The figure I hadn't seen before, standing in front of me now. Her face was blank, emotionless, and yet there was a cold, unnerving smile painted across her lips. She was wearing the same outfit as earlier, but it didn't look right. The fabric seemed to shift under the light, stretching and pulling in ways that didn't make sense. It was her, but it wasn't. It was Beyoncé, and yet it wasn't. It was a distorted version of her, like a reflection in a cracked mirror. a version of her that shouldn't exist. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. I couldn't move. Her eyes met mine, and I felt the flood of panic rising in my throat, but still, I couldn't speak. She wasn't real. She couldn't be. No one should be able to look at me like that. I reached out, my hand trembling, but the moment I did, something shifted, like the very room had bent around me. The temperature dropped even further, and I saw her smile twist into something wrong. Her eyes seemed to bleed into the darkness, swirling with shadows, endless and black. "Don't look away," she whispered. But the voice that came out wasn't hers. It was a distorted, guttural thing, unnatural and harsh. It echoed around me, amplifying the room's cold, suffocating presence. I couldn't breathe. The air was thick, pressing in on me from all sides. I tried to speak, tried to force myself to say something, but all that came out was a strangled gasp. Her smile stretched wider, impossibly wide, until it felt like it was consuming the entire room. Her lips parted, revealing teeth that didn't belong, too sharp, too jagged, too unnatural. And then I saw it, her reflection in the mirror behind her. But it wasn't her reflection. It was someone else, someone I didn't recognize, someone twisted and broken. Their eyes were wide open, staring at me with a kind of hopelessness that I couldn't understand. "Look at her," the whispers urged again. And this time, it wasn't just the voices in my head. It was the reflection. It was her. It was everything. Pushing, pulling, forcing me to look. I tried to turn away, tried to break free from it, but the weight of the room, the weight of the vision in front of me, held me in place. I was suffocating, drowning in the darkness of it all. And that's when I realized the worst part. The room, the whispers, the figure in front of me weren't the worst of it. I was the one who was changing. The horror wasn't just outside me, it was inside me, worming its way into my mind, twisting it, breaking it down. I didn't know how much longer I could hold on. I didn't know how much longer I could stay here, in this place, with her. But one thing was certain. I had seen too much, and I knew I couldn't leave. As I stumbled back, struggling to escape the nightmare that was swallowing me whole, I heard one final thing, the last thing I needed to hear. "You're not going anywhere." I didn't think. I didn't process. I just moved. The air felt thick, suffocating, pressing down on my chest as I stumbled backward, my legs unsteady. Sweat clung to my skin, my hands trembling as they reached for something, anything to hold on to. The floor felt slick, like the room was slipping away beneath me. My breath was erratic, frantic. I should have run, should have turned, but I couldn't. I was frozen in place, paralyzed by the weight of what I'd just seen. She, the distorted version of Beyoncé, was gone now, but it didn't matter. Her face, her twisted smile, those eyes burning through me, stayed with me. I could still see it, still feel it. My body betrayed me. Too terrified to move, too terrified to breathe. I thought I was going to scream, but no sound came. The pounding of my heart drowned everything out. Slowly, I turned, my muscles stiff. The mirror reflected nothing but empty air. But no, not nothing. The whispers from earlier became deafening, but my body wouldn't obey. My gaze was locked on the mirror. The reflection, it wasn't just a twisted version of Beyoncé anymore. It was me. Or rather, A version of me that wasn't me. The eyes staring back at me weren't mine. They were wide, empty, hollow. I wasn't that empty. I wasn't lost. But there it was, my face, grinning in a way that felt unnatural. I shook my head, trying to tear myself away from the mirror, but it felt like the reflection was reaching for me. I could feel it, as if my own image was pulling at my soul, dragging me towards something I didn't want to face. A chill ran through me, deep into my bones. A coldness I couldn't escape. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. My body was shutting down, my mind screaming in horror at the paralysis that took hold. How was this happening? The pounding in my chest was deafening. The whispers weren't just in my head anymore. They filled the room, pressing down on me, rising higher, louder. The meaning was clear. They were telling me something that felt like it was breaking me apart. Don't look away. The voice was sharp, commanding. The walls themselves seemed to speak, joining the whispers, demanding my attention. My hands were shaking, clutching my head in an attempt to block it out. But no matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried to escape, the presence was closing in. The dread was consuming me. What was happening to me? I wanted to run, needed to leave. My legs shook violently, but with a final desperate surge, I forced myself to move. I spun around, stumbling toward the door, my breath ragged, sweat slicking my palms. My heart hammered in my chest. I didn't dare look back. But the door wouldn't open. I pulled at the handle, harder this time, feeling the cool metal dig into my palm. But it wouldn't budge. It was locked. I tried with every ounce of strength I had left, but it felt as if something stronger than me was keeping it shut. Something keeping me in. This was it. The realization hit me like a punch. There was no escape. Not from this. I wasn't just stuck in the room. I was stuck in this nightmare. The thing I had walked into wasn't a show, a performance. It was a trap, and I had already fallen into it. The voices continued their screams, the whispers turning into distorted cries. It felt like I was losing myself, my grip on reality slipping away. My mind was unraveling, threads breaking apart as the weight of it all crushed me from every side. I didn't know how much longer I could hold on. And then, in the deafening silence, one final voice emerged. Low, soft, chilling. You can't leave. Not until we're done. I turned around, my legs shaking, my heart racing. But the room was empty now. There was nothing left, except the suffocating, oppressive feeling of being trapped in a nightmare that wouldn't end. I thought I'd escaped. I thought I'd run far enough that the nightmare would fade with each step, but it hasn't. It's still here, lingering, gnawing at the edges of my thoughts. I see their faces when I close my eyes. Her face, twisted, grinning, and I can hear the whispers even when I try to drown them out. I don't know what I'm meant to do with this. I don't know how to unsee what I've seen. I've tried to convince myself it was just a bad dream, that I've been imagining things. But the room, the locked door, the reflection, it was too real. And now, I'm not sure I'll ever be free of it. The voices are getting louder again, pushing at the back of my mind. Whatever it is, whatever I stepped into that night, it's still watching, still waiting, and it won't let go. Not now, not ever.